Hello and welcome to Real Talk. I am your host, Paul Britton. With me this evening to discuss Oscar things that happened last night. And if you're watching this not on the Monday after the Oscars, a few nights ago or a few weeks ago, whatever the case may be, Kristen Smith.
Yay, Nora.
Yay, Nora is right. Yes, yay, Nora. So let's just start. We're gonna just jump right in. Uh, and say yay, Honora. So Honora made history. You can say Sean Baker made history, but like Honora made history. First film to have one person win 4 Oscars for that film. Just a crazy night for Honora. What do you think it means? Because I have thoughts, but I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Well, so I have a lot of thoughts about the win.
Yeah.
For me, Honora's one was so huge because I have been watching the Oscars for over 20 years, and this is the first time my favorite movie of the year won.
Okay, first time ever.
First time ever that my favorite
Wow.
movie of the year
Okay.
won.
Okay.
Every single year, I'm usually rooting for something that I know is not going to win. There's a couple times where there's years where I am rooting for movies the movies I'm rooting for wins. Like when Parasite won, it was not my favorite movie of the year. It was in my top 10. But I was rooting for it to win because I'm like, this win to me is just so good historically.
Right.
And that's how I feel about this one, where I'm like, honestly, this win feels like Midnight Cowboy winning in terms of
okay.
In terms of just it's hard to imagine a movie like Midnight Cowboy resonating with which is usually a very prudish kind of semi-conservative type of content wise, they tend to kind of shy away from things. They used to
sure.
That's what I kind of mean. Whereas
but they do love people who play sex workers. Let's just not, let's be clear. The movies themselves, maybe not a lot, but people who play sex workers, they like that.
Yeah, but for me, what I think helps it is that it's probably I think to its rallying cry that we had from director Sean Baker when he won Best Director, where he was his big speech was, we need to really rally behind the theater and take things away from streaming, because we've seen time and time again, times where you have smaller movies that go to streaming and they just get sucked because people people are not paying attention to them, as opposed to when they eventually do go to theater, they actually do make money and people actually see them and people talk about them. They don't get lost in this Rolodex of whatever the algorithm is just showing to people. And
he was really calling out filmmakers like Fincher and Soderbergh, who in the past or the very recent past have been totally comfortable having their movies not shown in theaters, even if they sort of say, oh, I want my movie in a theater, but I don't really have any say. When you go to Netflix to make a movie, you kind of know it's not really going to get a wide release.
Yeah, and in cases like Fincher, Mank and The Killer would have been amazing in theaters. The sound of Mank is amazing, and the craftsmanship in The Killer is amazing
for sure.
And they would have made money, especially The Killer would have made a lot of money.
You think so?
I think so.
What was its budget? Was its budget 20, or was it more than that? Because if its budget was 20, it would have made money. But I
can imagine it's possible. Sometimes his budgets are a little bit higher, but he's kind of like Scorsese in that he just has a base of people who would go to it. The Killer. I mean, I don't want to get stuck on The Killer, but
no.
But that's where, when I think of Honora, I think that it's a good rallying cry for smaller movies, because we've been seeing a lot more recently, in the past couple of years, people being people are not making a $10 million movie anymore. It's either they have to invest $100 million in hopes they make $1 billion, as opposed to a modest movie that you're able to just like take $100 instead of taking $100 million, like give $10 million to 10 different people and
Yeah.
like make interesting movies. And like that's an example of like this is what you can do with a smaller budget.
Yeah. I feel bad because I feel like there is a very recent history of that supports the false narrative that the studios push forth of, well, those movies just don't make money. Like, for example, I mentioned Soderbergh. Soderbergh finally had something come back out to theaters in Presence, and it didn't. It did nothing. Like it just didn't register. There was a movie that Sergio and I last week talked about, which was just like this sort of like low budget but high concept sort of sci-fi movie. Actually, it wasn't even all that high concept, but like a low budget sci-fi movie, Elevation, that came out in 2024. I didn't even hear about it, and like it got a full release. It didn't reach streamers until last week, but it came out last November, and so it's like, and it had Anthony Mackie. He was the producer, and so it's, obviously, look, I would say that part of that is, one, not understanding when to release things, like two, not understanding really how to market some things, and three, the streamers unfortunately training people that, what, if you don't want to go to the theaters, just hang out, it'll come.
Yeah, and to me, what really accentuated this point, I don't know if you had this experience. We watched the Oscars on Hulu, and it cut off right before Best Actress.
Oh, really? Like it just stopped
Yeah.
broadcasting?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So you didn't. So
I didn't
this
hear
is the
about
thing.
this.
Hulu cut off its streaming before Best Actress. So I had no idea Mikey
It cut off
Madison
at the
won.
three. It cut off at the 3 hour mark, or 3.5 hour
At
mark, or
9:30.
whatever.
Yeah, at 9:30 they stopped it, and apparently
Okay.
it was a huge deal. Like people were so upset because they don't have the ABC app anymore. So like the only way
Yeah.
you can watch it via
Was
streaming
on
is
Hulu.
was on Hulu, and Hulu
That,
stopped it before Actress in Picture.
that's
So like
brutal.
I had to go onto my phone trying to be like, okay, what's going on? And being like, oh, holy shit, Mikey Madison just upset
Yeah.
over Demi Moore, which
Yeah.
I wanted to happen. I
Right.
felt
For
so
sure.
terrible for Demi Moore, but
I
like I
did
was
too.
just like, fuck you streamers for doing this. Like
Yeah.
if there was
Yeah.
anything about like having a speech about we need to stop prioritizing streamers and then
Yeah.
streamers cutting off right
Yeah.
afterward. Like that is so prescient.
That is, yeah. So I you've answered, what does it mean for you, the Honora win? You've answered on the big scope of things, what does it mean? And I love that. Like I agree with you entirely. But specifically for Honora, does this do anything for it as other beyond just, hey, it's an Oscar winning Best Picture now, and if people want the complete list, will it, do you think it obviously bumps it up in the consciousness
It
significantly,
does,
but
but I've seen so many bad takes. The takes are really bad. The backlash is really bad.
right,
Like,
like I'll give you an example. Nomadland, obviously won Best Picture, was a thing at the time, but no impact. Like there, no, it just didn't have any carry any weight. That win, but Coda, same thing.
yeah, it's hard to know what the impact is going to be for it. I think, and this is my personal opinion, but I
Right.
also think it's kind of general consensus that like Honora is a better movie than those two movies.
Okay, fair.
That like there seems to be a general consensus that like this as a movie is just better than some of those, but it's hard to know whether you have a movie like Nomadland or The Artist that
Yeah.
wins these big awards and
Right.
then just like people don't even talk about it. Like
Right.
even movies like Green Book still get talked about, even though people fucking hate the shit out of that movie
But that's
because
part of
like
the why it gets
it's part of its
talked about.
legacy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I've just seen so many bad takes. Like the
Okay.
backlash I've seen since it won has like people are just like shitting on sex workers, and I'm like, oh god, I hate the fact that this is what has become.
Yeah, no, I agree. But I've also seen some very positive too. Like I don't think it's all I don't think the conversation has been all negative. I do want to emphasize. I have seen equal time spent on. You know what? This was just a really good time at the theaters, a good experience, a good watching experience, and those need to be rewarded. My take on it is that I think from an Oscars year standpoint, I feel like if you compare this year to last year, and I don't think it's unfair to do those types of comparisons. Last year was a super top heavy year where the great movies were really, really great. Zone of Silence, Oppenheimer, in spite of your complaints, Barbie. There were really, really genuinely great movies. American Fiction's another one that I loved. I loved 9 of the 10 nominees last year, whereas this year, it was just the opposite, where I like all summer I was liking every movie that I was going to, whereas last summer I didn't like anything I saw, and the big stuff I was like, oh, okay, that was good, but there were problems. I think there were 2 movies that I that were on the in the 10 that I had no qualms with. One of them being Anora, the other one being the one that I would have rooted for, which is Nickel Boys, in spite of the fact knowing that Nickel Boys had 0 chance of winning.
Yes.
So those were the only 2, like, wow, these could have competed last year. I feel like from the historical context of what Anora accomplished, it accomplished it because the relative strength of the other nominees was okay. Like, what I don't feel like there was an opportunity to really be like, and going back more than just last year, but a real opportunity to award a movie like Worst Person in the World in screenplay, just because Anora kind of was the best screenplay, even though, did I love the screenplay as much as The Worst Person in the World? Definitely not. Like, definitely not. I liked the screenplay a lot. It was really fantastic, but it wasn't like Worst Person in the World was just, one of my all-time favorite screenplays, and I didn't have that connection with it. And I feel like same thing goes for like editing. There wasn't something that was just like, wow, or, like, I think it accomplished what it accomplished because of the relative weakness of the top. Am I out of place, or is that a fair?
I don't think you're entirely wrong,
Okay.
but I will kind of compare this to 2021.
Okay.
That was the Coda year,
Right.
where that was a year that, as you said, like, we had some great nominees
Right.
from like Drive My Car, Worst Person in the World, like Dune Part 1 came out that year. And like we
Right.
had so many great movies that came out this year that, in comparison, I was like, there are some great nominees here. And I
Right.
thought those winners were in my personal opinion, I don't like majority of those winners that year.
Yeah.
Like,
No, I'll agree with you, especially Coda. But yeah,
yeah, like Belfast winning
Fast for screenplay
screenplay,
was messed up,
like
especially when it had
Coda winning
yeah.
screenplay. Like Troy Kotsur to me was like out of like the top, like that top, and like Jane Campion, because I just love Jane Campion. But like
Right.
otherwise, like as far as to me, like I felt like pretty similar in terms of quality in like
Mhm.
what was being nominated versus like what was winning. Whereas I feel like this year, and actually like in thinking about this right now, most of the winners in majority of the categories were either number 1 or number 2 on my personal ballot. So in
Okay.
terms
Yeah.
of like who won this year,
Yeah. No,
I'm
that's
pretty happy.
right. But again, I think that's because there just weren't a lot of nominees, and
Yeah,
I
because
was like,
there's some good there was like some exciting nominees, but like in terms of like what we were used to the past couple years, because I felt like the past couple years, like with some exceptions, we had some pretty fucking good nominees the past
yeah,
couple years.
exactly. And that's
And
kind of where I was
And
coming
at
from.
least this year, like, yeah, it was a mixed batch, but at least I felt like they did a better job of who won
Right.
versus like they could have easily done like Wicked for picture. They could have easily
Mhm.
done, I mean, this is my personal opinion. They could have easily done Conclave, which would have been okay as a best
Sure. Yeah.
picture, but I feel like that would have been a coda and people would have forgotten about it.
Right.
So like that's where I'm just like, I feel like at least looking at the batch of winners we got last night, I think this will age very, very well.
Yeah.
As opposed to 2021, where I'm just like, oh yeah, Will Smith got an Oscar that year.
Yeah, I
And
think it'll age well because
Jessica
the
Chastain has an
movies
Oscar, and we from a movie that doesn't exist.
right, yeah. The movies were like you said, like they were kind of the top two, you know. So let's start talking about the broadcast and the winners. Like I want to skip to first at screenplay because I know that you and I both love the screenplay category. And it set up a dynamic that was just obliterated probably about an hour later. But the dynamic that was set up with screenplay, where Honora won for original and Conclave won for adapted, that it was just like, okay, that's it. Like, that's it. This is a 2-horse race. It's either going to be Honora or it's going to be Conclave. There's really no sense in even having a conversation outside of that, which was kind of the conversation coming in anyway. You know, there would be some people say, well,
it was Honora versus Conclave.
Yeah.
Like,
right.
It was a toss up for some people.
And then as soon as those two won screenplay, anybody who was holding out that, well, maybe Brutalist would win, they had to just stop, because immediately it was those two being so early and going to those two. It was like, oh, okay. And then, like, you know, an hour later when Honora got editing, it was over. Like, it was just,
no, when it got editing, I was like, oh, this is done. Like, there's no,
this isn't even interesting.
Because Conclave was the number, like, majority of people thought Conclave was going to win.
Yeah, the editing. Yeah, I know.
Which again would have still kept it competitive.
Correct.
And then once Honora won, we were just like, oh, okay, this is Honora.
Over. Yeah. Like, I would have loved to seen like the live betting odds, because it probably was like Honora minus 400, Conclave plus 300, but then went to Honora minus 10 million, and then Conclave. You know, like, just like, there's just no way. There's just no way you.
Yeah, if people had bet money on Honora for editing, you probably would have done a very good job, because
the
number two of the odds was Wicked.
Right. So. Okay, so we agree with that. The other thing I want to mention is that happened very early in the show was the animated, and this is where we're going to start talking about
big. That was that was like very early. I got that wrong.
Okay, so who did you have? Wild Robot or?
I went with what I thought because I had more nominations, but this is also, and I think this is what I've seen in some circles talk about, that like Flo winning along with The Boy and the Heron is like a signal of like something different. Like, we have to consider something different, as opposed to back in the day when it was just like, what's Pixar doing? Like, what's Disney doing?
Yeah.
Because like it dominated so thoroughly for so long.
I want to take a quick step backwards really quick. Do we read the screenplays? I do not read the screenplays. Do you ever read the screenplays?
I don't think I ever have.
Yeah, no, I don't do that either. But okay, so you did have Wild Robot. If you were to pick one, Flo or Wild Robot, who would you have gone with?
I have not seen Wild Robot. I saw Flo. Flo was cute. I liked it.
Super cute. Okay.
I liked the fact that it was made entirely in Blender.
Yeah, that is funny. Like, hey, anybody can do this.
By one dude in Blender. And I'm like, that's phenomenal. Like, I watched it. I actually watched it. I had watched it with my girlfriend, and she was, I know she had some, she's into animation. She's like an animator, like artist herself. And she originally was kind of like had mixed opinions of it until she learned it was done entirely in Blender. And she's like, oh wait, never mind. That's impressive.
Yeah.
For the feat that it is gorgeous for having done it in Blender.
Yeah. So you mentioned that Honora was your favorite movie of the year. My two favorite movies of the year were Wild Robot and Flo. Like they just absolutely look. I lean towards being susceptible to loving animated movies more than others. Like other years where
so like I understand that's my handicap.
Right. Okay. So, like other years where the animated movies have been my favorite, were like Kubo and the Two Strings was one of my favorites of all time. Wally, the year that Wally came out, was my favorite thing. Like, so it's not uncommon for me, but for the top two to be that is somewhat uncommon. Where Anora was actually my number three. So, you know, and it's. And by the way, that's my favorite, not necessarily what I thought was the best. Like, I still say Nickel Boys was the best, but favorite and best don't necessarily have to match up.
Yeah, I mean,
So
sometimes it's like, what I'm gonna use the worst phrase, what tickles your heart and what tickles your brain?
for sure, absolutely, and I mean, those were the two that tickled my heart the most. My hope was Wild Robot would win in animated and Flow would win in international. I realized that was a long shot, but it's what I hoped for. Didn't happen. That's
But
okay.
but it's interesting though. What is interesting is how majority of people, myself included, despite the fact that like I'm Still Here had 3 nominations and Amelia Perez had 13, most people were predicting that I'm Still Here was going to spoil Amelia Perez in that category.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we could talk about it now. What like uh so the fact that Flo was even nominated international
Amazing. I
is
loved
amazing.
that
Yeah.
nomination.
Right. Have you seen I'm Still Here?
I haven't. I almost went to go see it. Like
Okay.
it was in the theaters right near here, and I briefly considered it right before, and then just like, with life, I was just like, I'm just gonna wait till street. Like
Yeah.
this year was like just a tough year, and I
Okay.
feel like
Okay.
I lost steam trying to watch all the movies. Like I
Okay.
still have September 5 like
Okay.
waiting in my queue to watch.
Yeah.
So
It's streaming now, so you're good to go.
I know I
Um
need to watch it.
uh, uh I'm Still Here is really good, but this goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is like if I'm Still Here had come out last year, it's not even discussed as a possible nominee for Best Picture. Like, ignoring international feature, just Best Picture. The fact that it was nominated for Best Picture is just kind of like, I think it speaks volumes to the relative quality at the top of the list for this year. Um, this is going to be our first discussion on speeches.
Okay.
So, animated short, I didn't see it. One, I would have assumed that even after Adrian Brody's speech, I would have assumed that was the longest speech of the night. And this is where we get into I don't think the Academy needs to feel bad sometimes about just letting people know, hey, look, you're the animated short guy, you need to move on. Like you mentioned Brody's speech was rambling. Their speech was, and granted, I admit they English not their native language. They've repeated themselves multiple times, much like Adrian Brody did. It was circular, and it went on for like well over a minute and a half, I think. And it's just like, guys, you this early in the show, you cannot be getting stuck like this.
Yeah, like and I kind of understand that like in the moment it's hard because
Right.
ideally you'd want them like on one hand, ideally I feel like you'd want to have something written down.
Mhm.
Like Sean Baker had this entire page full of
Right.
stuff and
Right.
he barreled through it.
Right.
And in other cases, like I think at the year Olivia Colman won,
Yeah.
where she kind of had a meandering speech, but she was just so charming because she was not expecting to win.
Right.
And therefore, like it was kind of delightful just to watch her vamp and just be her and be like,
Mhm.
oh yeah, this is why we love you because
Right.
you're just this delightful human.
Right.
And there are cases like I feel like there were cases kind of like I thought the substance makeup people were delightful. I
Yes.
thought they kind of had a
Agreed.
nice like there's times where things can just kind of be a little bit chaotic and a little like have a lot of
Yeah.
emotion to it. Like um what is it? The Danish people who won for live action short,
Yeah.
which I thought was cute. Even
Right.
just like Kieran Culkin's story about his wife, I was
Yes.
like, "That's hilarious that
Right.
it happened
Right.
again."
Well, I want to come back to Kieran Culkin, but I like to piggyback on what you're saying. Like, I loved the best score guy, like him being just an absolute, you know,
So
like
uncomfortable being up
socially
there.
uncomfortable dork was just so endearing to me as a socially uncomfortable dork, who
Yeah.
who worked on being able to speak. You know, like I had to put forth effort. Like, I know that I can't read a thing. Like, if I try to
Yeah.
read a thing, I'm going to start stuttering. Like, there's no stopping it.
And
You
that's where
know.
like and then that's where the flip side is that I just wish some people had an understanding of like, okay, you don't have much to say
Right.
or you haven't quite thought this out, just wrap it up. Just like
Yeah.
understand when to wrap it up. To me, that was when Amelia Perez won Best Song, and I was like, okay, I'm kind of over y'all talking a little
Let's
bit.
do that one now. Okay, let's do that one now. So obviously, neither of us were rooting for Amelia Perez to win anything. This was the second year in a row where my son, I love him. He's 17. He goes to movies with me a lot. He doesn't go to everything, but you know, he does tend to go to see the you know the Oscar worthy stuff more often than sort of like the big stuff. So he does
Mhm.
get interested in. He's very recently has gotten interested in the Oscars themselves, and he refuses. Sometimes he lets the narrative and my reaction to things speak louder than you know. I want him to experience them all, but like he refused to go to watch Amelia Perez because I explained to him what happens at the end. He's like, "Oh, that's the dumbest thing. I'm never going to watch that." And then he read, you know, he's as every 17-year-old, he's super active on all of the, you know, what's going on and on socials and everything else, and understands the negativity behind and the problematic stuff behind Amelia Perez, that he just was like actively pissed off when Amelia Perez won, like way more so that when it won for best song. And
Yeah. Like I had to explain because we were trying to explain to people because like so many people in my circles, like my Oscar party is this is gonna sound so self-indulgent, but my Oscar party that I go to is often just there. They want to watch me react to it.
that's brilliant. I
And
love
so
it.
because I know I'm super into it. And so a lot of them had never like almost all of them had never seen Amelia Perez. And so I was trying to explain to them like why it's a movie that's embarrassed to be a musical
Right.
and like how people are kind of whisper rapping the entire time. And then
Yeah.
that moment when they showed the clips of it, I was just like, there it is. This is what I'm trying to tell you. This is
And
what
that's
this
not
movie.
even the most egregious stuff about the movie. Like, I was thinking about how would I explain this movie? And the way I would explain the movie is, imagine making a movie about a pharmaceutical executive who who's also a serial killer, and only begins to recognize other
So
people's
basically
human.
a pharmaceutical executive.
Right.
But
But yeah, exactly. I purposefully use that as the person's job. But like serial killer in the Dexter sense, not in the corporate malfeasance sense. Um, and who only begins to see other people's humanity after you know coming out as trans and living life as a woman, and then uses all the money they made as a pharmaceutical executive to lead police to the graves of all the people that he killed as she killed as a pharmaceutical as a serial killer. And then all the families of the people who he recovers throw him a parade when he dies, throw her a parade when she dies. Now imagine that, and the only thing you change about the plot of the movie that I just told you is that she's not a pharmaceutical executive, she's actually a drug lord. And that's the only thing you change from the plot. Isn't that just an absolutely ridiculous conceit for a movie? And you would have to say yes. That I don't understand how this movie got made, let alone how anyone likes it.
and and then the most embarrassing thing for me about this movie
Yeah,
winning 2 Oscars is
yeah,
that neither speech both speeches were very self-indulgent in the
yeah,
sense that like it's a movie that piggybacks and uses trans people and Mexican people for clout. And
yeah,
then at no point in neither of the speech do they recognize those two groups of people who have major things that are happening to them.
Yeah.
And it's just like, you have vulnerable people that your movie's about, and all of your speeches are about how happy that you are that you won an award.
And this song won more than Zoe Saldana's. The song one was perplexingly so. Like it just was like, what are you guys even talking about with this movie? Like, and you know, the director, I can't remember his name, won, but
Jacques Audiard.
Yeah, Audiard won for that, but didn't get to talk, which is hilarious and appropriate. And
Good.
yeah, exactly. And the woman who wrote the songs starting to sing at the end, like, what is she doing? And it is the cringiness of that moment that is the entire tone of the entire movie.
Yeah, because it's not charming like when
It's not charming at all.
RRR won.
Right.
And they sang their acceptance speech like the Carpenters because it inspired them. And
Right.
that's just so goddamn charming.
Yes.
And this person was just kind of rambling and not making a sense, but so happy for herself that they won, and then started singing. And you're just like, what is, girl?
And all she kept saying is Emilia Paris. And it's like, is that like a song from the movie? Because I don't remember, because your songs were terrible except for the one that actually won. Like, that was an actually good song, good number, memorable moment from the movie. And it's the one good song, good moment, memorable moment from the movie. Everything else that happens in that movie is just utterly forgettable, and I hope it goes away forever. Okay.
It's okay. As I had messaged you, it now it ties the record for the most Oscar losses.
Yeah, and the fact that it shares that with The Irishman, it brings joy to my heart.
No, it's not The Irishman.
Irishman has 11 also.
No, it had 10.
Oh, it only had 10? I thought it had 11. Okay.
Yeah, the other two were The Color Purple and The Turning Point.
I don't even know The Turning Point. When's that from?
It is from 1977. It also was nominated for 11 Oscars and won 0, just like The Color Purple.
Okay. The Color Purple one, we'll table that.
Yes. Because it should have won some.
For sure. Several, but we'll table. Okay. So I kind of feel like we've hit. Oh, I do want to just give flowers to Dune. I do want to give flowers to Dune.
I'm so happy Dune won. I'm so happy. Like, I would even have been happy as much as, like, Brutalist was my favorite cinematography of the year.
Yeah.
If Dune won cinematography, I would have been just as happy.
Yeah.
If Dune won art direction, I would have been happy.
Yeah. You saying that for Dune, that was me for Nosferatu. Like, I was both, especially art direction, I was really, really, really standing for Nosferatu. But then my number 2 was Dune, and then my number 3 on all of those were The Brutalists. But
and then seeing the nominees for costume, and I'm like, Dune should be here. Like, let's get rid of a complete unknown and just add Dune here, because Dune had the best costumes of the year.
That's exactly what my son said, was like, which is the one costume one that he, his was Gladiator 2. His was Gladiator 2. He's like, I would have done Dune instead of Gladiator 2.
I can kind of see it, but I'm just like, how many brown sweaters do you need to have in a complete unknown to be recognized?
No, okay. But okay. I get it.
I know.
I get it.
Dune deserves a little bit. It deserved a little bit more. You could have given it costumes. You could have given it editing. You could have given it makeup. Not Emilia Perez for makeup.
Right. No, that's a key one also. But I'm glad we got to give flowers to Dune. Let's do the supporting actor categories. On the male side, we have Kieran Culkin. On the female side, we have Zoe Saldana. Both of these were the two, like, there's not even a conversation.
Yes. And they're both
categories.
Lead performances.
They're both lead performances in supporting that just, prevent any conversation because of they I mean, it's not like they won the right precursors, they won every fucking precursor, and like that matters at all, and it how do you feel when there are big categories like this where there's just zero like intrigue at all?
It's tough. It's like most of it, I think my issue sometimes just comes with like when it comes to categories like this, where because like even in critics groups, like these two, I think Ariana Grande won, I think maybe slightly more than Zoe, but Kieran Culkin, he dominated
Yeah.
supporting actor.
Yep.
And that's where I just want to tell people like you can vote for other things.
Yeah.
Like it
Yeah.
used to be back in the day, like one of the beautiful things about BAFTAs, and I love BAFTAs, is that like BAFTAs used to be not only very British, but they used to do their own thing. And
Right.
they used to sometimes go wild for nominations. Like there was a year, remember the movie Drive with Ryan Gosling?
Absolutely.
Yeah, like that movie got a Best Picture and Best Director nomination at BAFTAs
Nice.
that year. And
Nice.
like I miss when BAFTAs kind of would throw their flowers to just movies that you would not expect them to, and
I
sometimes
don't
even honor
I
their
I
own.
I don't miss about BAFTAs that they've never nominated Denzel Washington for anything, but that's
It's they're not perfect. They're not perfect. They needed a jury to step in to be like, "Guys, you need
Yeah.
to stop
Yeah.
nominating all white people."
Right.
Like, you have a problem. But like, that's where, um, I do wish sometimes that there was just more groups try I because some groups now have started to become, "Let's try to predict the Oscars," and I
Yeah.
wish more groups were just like, "No, let's actually just give who we think." Like, when we have a critics group that gives a huge out there performance that wins one of those awards, I'm like, "That's great." Like,
That's
I'm so
great.
happy for
Yeah.
you.
For sure.
And
Agreed.
that's category of fraud aside. That's aside from the fact that, like, I don't like a real pain in Amelia Perez. And, like
Right. Oh, you
and
didn't I forgot that you didn't like A Real Pain. I forgot about that. Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Kieran Culkin is good. He
Yeah.
is such a fucking asshole the entire movie, and it was
Yes.
so difficult for me to like. He's good in the movie. I
Yes.
just it
He's
just did not
impossible
do
to
it for me.
endear to. Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, and Zoe Saldana, by the way, that everything we've just said that doesn't take away from how awesome his speech was. And I
I
thought,
loved his speech. He
yeah,
had one of my
I
favorite speeches of the night.
yeah, and it was a really good way to start the show, coming off of the kind of the tone set by Conan O'Brien and Adam Sandler. By the way, the Adam Sandler moment was my favorite moment of the entire night.
I loved Conan O'Brien. Well, I always loved Conan O'Brien, but
Right,
I thought he did such a great job.
I agree.
He had some early 90s he had some 90s Conan bits, like
Yes,
the
the,
Dune worm playing
the
chopsticks
Dune
was
Wayne
one of my
Dune Worm
favorite
making multiple
moments.
appearances was
I loved it.
yeah. And turning Adam Sandler into sort of like, one of his like side characters was just absolutely brilliant and perfect. Um,
And then him going to harass Timothy Chalamet.
right. Just I loved it. But having Kieran follow that up with his speech and just with his general, air, it worked perfectly. So Zoe Saldana, coming much later in the, surprisingly much later, because normally they keep them pretty close, those two
Yeah,
categories.
and then usually actresses first, but sometimes they
Right.
kind of flip and flop between supporting actor and supporting actress.
Right.
So
But normally they're like they front load those big time. This time you kind of had to wait a little while for Zoe Saldana's. Me personally, so first of all, I'm voting for Ariana Grande every day of the week and then 27 million times on Sunday.
100%.
Her performance in Wicked was as good of a performance as I can ever remember seeing in, kind of like any movie where my expectations were literally zero. Like a lot of times I'll go into a movie and have expectations and then there's a great performance. Like, okay. But like my expectations for Ariana Grande were just not non-existent. And she just absolutely owned that movie every single, especially, when Cynthia Erivo is just also similarly owning the movie, but Ariana Grande like manages to upstage her. It's ridiculous. But Zoe Saldana wins. I get it. She's by far the best thing in a really problematic, not good movie. I personally loved her speech. I thought it was very endearing and genuine. I and maybe I'm being nice, but like I allow for the actor categories to just be a little, a little, self-congratulatory and maybe not self-congratulatory, but as long as they're telling a story, and I think I felt like she
Mhm.
had a story to tell, and it was a compelling story to tell. I hear you on her lack of sort of calling out the trans community
It's
and
just self-awareness, I think.
yeah, and
Like,
but
I'm happy for her. She's a
yeah,
great actor.
yeah,
Love her work. I think she comes out of that movie the best,
right,
and she does a good job.
yeah,
It's just I just wish she had a little more self-awareness.
and for a movie that was completely lacked any
And tone
modicum
deaf,
of
yeah.
self-awareness, like I guess that carries over. Uh, Director, obviously Honora wins. This is where, much like screenplay, although there wasn't really any screenplay that I've been like, well, I kind of really wish this X had won. With director, I do kind of feel like Brutalist would have been like a really, if you're going
It
to
was
kind of,
possible.
yeah, and I just feel like as good of a movie as Honora is, I feel like the screenplay sets it up, and the directing is excellent, but is set up by the screenplay. Whereas The Brutalist, I don't know that the screenplay is necessarily even good, but the directing of that film is so monumental and strong and beautiful and brilliant, and the vision is just so monumental, strong, and beautiful and brilliant. And it deserved for cinematography, but I think the direction deserved a little bit too.
Yeah, there was a little bit of I mean, the biggest thing that Honora had was DGA,
Mhm.
because I think there was still some question about whether or not Brady Corbet was gonna win for Best Director.
Right.
There was a video I watched. This dude, he does this experiment where he gets 100 anonymous ballots from, Academy voters.
Oh wow.
And
Okay.
yeah, so he does first a preferential ballot to try and predict who's gonna win Best Picture,
Okay.
which he's been doing since Power of the Dog,
Okay.
which he had predicted from their ballots that Power of the Dog was gonna win, but then Coda won.
Yes.
But then he started recently doing other categories. So he started asking them, okay, give me your winner for each category. And sometimes it has helped him be like, okay, this one's a little bit closer. Like the spread is a lot higher,
Yeah.
as opposed to last year, for example, where um, people kind of thought it was going to be Lily Gladstone.
Right.
And then
Right.
in his experiment, the person who had the majority by a long shot was Emma Stone.
Oh
So he
wow.
predicted
Okay.
Emma Stone.
Yeah.
And so he did his experiment this year, like a couple days before the Oscars. And his two that were way ahead of all the other of the pack were Brady Corbet in director and Demi Moore in actress,
Oh
which
wow.
was
Okay.
really
Interesting.
fascinating.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So I listen to a gambling podcast, and once
Mhm.
a year they have a guy who kind of specializes in Oscar gambling come on, and he said, look, they said, what's a dog that you feel like is, your biggest dog bet, the one that you feel like, you're not just putting the money down because you kind of like the price for the odds, but one that you actually feel like, yes, this is going to win. And he said, I'm going with Mikey Madison, because I think that what we saw happen last year with Lily Gladstone losing out to Emma Stone is that if it's a close race, if there's two clear two clear contenders, most people at the Academy are going to go with the person who carries the movie over the person who's maybe on screen for only half of the time.
Mhm. Or
you know
who's
and
closer to Best Picture? Because Poor Things arguably was like second place
Sure.
to
Yeah.
Oppenheimer.
Yeah. And so, I mean, if you compare, what Demi had to do versus what Mikey had to do, it was clear Mikey Madison had to carry that movie, whereas Demi, and I mean, if you could do a joint nomination and you put Demi and Margaret Qualley next, side by side next to each other and said, this is our best, I'm voting for Demi and Margaret because the two of them together are amazing. Whereas separately, it's like, I don't think that Demi's quite as good without Margaret and vice versa, so it's tough not to say it should go to Mikey.
I'm incredibly biased. I think Mike Madison gives the best performance of the year. So like,
sure. Okay. Yeah.
It was pretty easy for like, but I also was a lot of people thinking it was going to be Demi Moore. And
absolutely. Yeah.
I knew maybe only of like, I watch a lot of like different channels that predict stuff, and only one of them predicted Mikey Madison based strictly off of BAFTA.
Okay.
And they were ecstatic. And you could see, I've watched a bunch of reactions too, and everyone, the minute it won Best Editing, all of them were like, I think Mikey Madison's actually going to take it. Yeah. And it was interesting to see how, like, because people really loved Anora, right. Mikey Madison was, and because Mikey Madison is the heart of Anora, people like that brought her to the win, as opposed to for Demi Moore, she had a narrative. She's really good in it. She's really good. But it was like performance and the movie really propelled Mikey Madison to that win.
I agree 100%. Yeah. Lastly, the Adrian Brody win. Now, I want to say I would have voted for Adrian Brody. Like
100%.
I feel like he deserves to win. Now, do I look at Adrian Brody and say this is a dude that should have 2 Oscars? In a vacuum, the answer is no.
The answer is no. Although when we look at the performances, it's hard to say no to not.
Because you can't look at it in a vacuum. You have to look at the performances. And the companion for this is Hilary Swank, where it's like, does Hilary Swank, if you, in a vacuum, if you just think Hilary Swank, hey, does she deserve 2 Oscars? Probably not. But then you say, look at this performance in $1 Million Baby, and look at this performance in
Boys Don't Cry. She's phenomenal in Boys Don't Cry.
So good in Boys Don't Cry.
It was a weak year, but like
I don't even want to get into that. I just want to be like,
I want to get into it.
Yeah, okay. I get on the big picture, Adrian Brody, 2 Oscars, but I mean, his performance in this movie is
it's like undeniable.
Yeah.
And honestly, ages so much better than Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan.
Right. Which is good. I don't want to take away from Timothée Chalamet. I am super excited.
Historically, these wins are good.
Yeah. I am super excited about watching him for the next 20 years. And I have season tickets for his movies. I will be at every one. But
I wonder if it'd be kind of like Leonardo. I wonder if he'd be like Leo DiCaprio, where there's a few times where he probably should have won. Like, I still think Call Me by Your Name, he should have won
for sure.
But we really wanted to give Gary Oldman a win.
Yeah.
Like, looking back, like
there's so many.
He would have been such a good winner. It would have been like, I feel like Adrian Brody winning now is how I would have felt if Timothy won for Call Me by Your Name. Yeah. And that I'd just be like, this is such a monumental performance that we'll look back and be like, this is undeniable.
Right. But all that being said, God damn it, Adrian Brody, just be prepared with your speech. And I have no problems. I literally have no problems with anybody going 5 minutes in the bigs. If you want to go, if you're picture director, or any one of the acting ones, even international film, and you want to go 5 minutes and you have something to say.
Yes.
Go have something to say and go 5 minutes. And I feel like Adrian Brody had something to say, but he waited 4 minutes to get to it. And
I would agree 100%. I'm happy with longer speeches if they do have something prepared, but definitely have a message. Like, I think like one of the longer speeches was like No Other Land. phenomenal speech. I'm
Right.
glad they gave that as much time as possible.
Right. And as
Whereas like he
uncomfortable
just
as it kind of felt, realizing that the politics of that movie doesn't necessarily align with a large portion of the Academy voters.
I
But
know, but at least like but like you said, like with those bigger categories, I'm happy if they can go longer.
yeah,
Just please like
have you
hone in
have
what
to,
you want to say.
yeah, yeah. That's my complaint of Adrian Brody. My complaint of Adrian Brody's speech is not, I need more time. I've been here before. My complaint of Adrian Brody's speech is not um, that he went long. My complaint is that he went long because he meandered for the first 3.5 minutes of it and took 3.5 minutes to get to
Yeah,
the
and then it
heart of
was
what
just
he wanted to say.
and then it was just kind of embarrassing that the Academy was like, "Okay, yeah, let's just start playing him off because he's not saying anything." And then
Yeah.
he had to, like, because of it, had to be like, "No,
Oh shit! I actually have
stop the
something to
music,"
say, and then
and
it's
then
like,
said it. And I'm just
yeah,
like, "You kind of lost us by that point." So, like,
right,
I
yeah,
know, I know you love your wife, but like,
right,
if that was so big for you, you should
right,
have led with that.
yeah. All right. I'm going to give you the last word in a minute. Not my last take, and I'm going to just throw this out there, is that The Two Towers, Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, was
Mhm.
nominated for Best Picture, won 2 awards that year, special effects, and one of the two sound. There's now only one sound. Dune Part Two, where we know that there's a third one coming, was nominated for several awards, including Best Picture, but won for two, special effects and sound. Coincidence? Obviously, we haven't seen Dune 3 yet, but I
Well,
just kind of want to throw
and
this out there.
and first Lord of the Rings,
Yeah,
Fellowship of the Ring won 5.
right.
And some of the ones that it won 5 for are, if I get this right, I'm gonna be so happy with
I'll be
myself.
so proud. I'm gonna. You want
I
me to
know
check you
visual
on this?
effects, I know makeup, I
Yes.
know score, I know cinematography, and I wanna say it was maybe either an art direction or sound, one of those. But, like, all those were the ones that the first Dune got.
Mm.
And then, uh and then, yeah, same thing with Dune Part 2 and hopefully Dune Part 3. I'd be
Yeah.
so happy if, like, Denis is finally able to get a Dune director nomination. Like, my heart still says his best work is still Arrival, but I'd be so happy for him if he got those flowers.
It won 4: cinematography, makeup,
Oh, and
music,
4. I thought it won 5.
cinematography, makeup, score, amazing, and visual effects. Oddly
Okay.
enough, it did not win the one sound it was nominated for.
What won that year? Oh,
Let's see.
That was Black Hawk Down.
Was that Black Hawk Down's year?
It is. It won Black Hawk Down won editing and sound.
It's hard to find because here we go. Sound effects. You're right. It was Black Hawk Down. All right. Very good. You're so good at that. All right. I want to let you have the final thought on last night's Oscars, the year, what it means going forward, whatever you want to kind of say. Hit me.
I'll make a bold take. I think in terms of winners,
Yeah.
um, obviously there are some wins the past few years I think are amazing. I think Zone of Interest winning sound is amazing. I think Anatomy of a Fall winning screenplay is amazing.
Yeah.
I think um even like things like Troy Kotzer, I love. Jane Campion, I love. Um, I know we're kind of a little mixed, like The Father, like Anthony Anthony
Hopkins.
Hopkins winning for The
Yeah.
Father,
Yeah.
like which to me, that movie is phenomenal. Even though I feel like people have forgotten most of those movies from 2020, I think people have forgotten, even though it was a pretty solid year.
Yeah.
Um,
All things considered.
all things considered, but like look, like now that I've had like the dust has settled and I've looked back at this year and looking at these wins, this decade, this might be my favorite batch of winners.
Nice. I like that.
Like
I like that so far.
in
And we've
terms,
got 5 more years to go.
yeah, but like in
Yeah.
terms of like, I think back to like, I think the cinematography in uh the brutalist and the score are amazing, and I think they
So
will
good.
always be amazing. And I
So
think
good.
Adrian Brody's phenomenal. I think Mikey Madison's win is gorgeous.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Yeah.
I think Nora winning will age so beautifully. I think also, I don't think I even mentioned, we maybe have mentioned it before where we talked to Nora or talked beforehand that I'm just like, if we, if the best Oscars to me are Oscars that are emblematic of that year,
Yeah.
Nora is emblematic of 2024.
I'll
It's
agree with you on that.
themes, it's narrative,
Yep.
like we can look back to years in the 60s. We can see
Yeah.
how societal, like big societal cultural changes
Yep.
shaped what was winning.
Yep.
And we saw that in the 1970s. Well, that stuff was winning. And we saw this in the themes
Yep.
of what was happening in the 80s and what
Yep.
people were feeling in the 80s.
Yep.
And like even like post 9/11, we can see this. And I
Okay.
feel like Honora is the movie of 2024, and I think
Yeah.
this will age beautifully.
And I think Oppenheimer, similarly, like Oppenheimer last year, very much is a similar thing where, and Everything Everywhere All at Once. I feel like we've got 3 years in a row of that. And I think that's a really, really good take. I like
Yeah.
that.
Even Nomadland, I'll even throw up Nomadland, I think, as forgettable,
Where the,
unfortunately, as it is.
yeah, for where the film industry was at that moment,
Yes.
it was like, okay, just super small, super understated, very quirky, weird, because just nothing was coming out. So
I think that's been the case since 2016. Like since
yeah.
Moonlight won,
Wow.
every
Okay.
single year, almost every single year, I feel like has been like trying to like that's a snapshot of what people were feeling and things that were happening, with like some exceptions, like Shape of Water, like Coda, where I think they were kind of like they're kind of forgotten a little bit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
like to me, yeah, this movie, I think this will hands down be the movie 2024. We will talk about this movie and this will represent us perfectly.
I love it. That's why I gave you the last word. Thank you so much,
Thank
Kristen,
you.
for coming on. Always, always, always a pleasure to have you. If anything comes out and you want to talk about it, please let me know. You're all open door. You're always welcome.
What is coming out this year? Is there anything coming out this year?
Yeah, there are movies coming out. Believe it or not, I know it's weird.
It
Coming
is
up,
weird.
I will say this: you usually don't come on at around this time of year, just because the stuff that's coming out is not necessarily stuff that is, I'll say, Kristen centric. Is that a fair?
We can come together for Megan 2.0.
Oh, when is that?
I don't know. I was just looking at my letterbox, what I've saved, and
Okay.
I was like, I can't name any of these because I have no idea what they were, other than
Yeah.
someone mentioned that they were interesting. There's also Tron. Tron's coming out.
Yeah, but we've got several months for that. Like, I'm going through and like I don't see anything where it's like the first thing that's coming out that I'm like, oh, I wonder if Kristen
Mickey
would.
17.
Oh, Mickey 17, that's right. Would
That's
you want to
coming
come
out.
on for Mickey 17? That's next week. That's actually
Possibly. I am
that's
in the process of we're in the home buying process. So it's gonna be a little crazy right now.
Oh my goodness, that's so amazing. Okay, well, hey, you're more than welcome to come out next week
Yeah,
for Mickey
we're getting a
17.
bigger place for all these movie posters that I have no wall space to put up.
Sweet. Any chance that you have a take on The Accountant and the fact that Accountant 2 is coming out in the end of April?
What is The Accountant?
Oh, never mind. Ben Stiller. Not Ben Stiller.
Ben
Ben
Affleck.
Affleck. Ben Affleck.
I mean,
yeah.
if Ben Stiller was in that movie, I would
Yeah.
be interested.
Yeah, I know. All right. Kristen Smith, everybody. That's our Oscars recap show. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.
Thank you.